You are not competing with other people for money. You are competing with a system designed to keep you ordinary. And the most painful part is this: the people at the top do not need better luck. They do not need to work harder. They already own the board game. This is financial education, and it is going to be uncomfortable. In 2026, you can feel it in your bones. You can feel it when rent jumps again while your paycheck barely moves. You can feel it when they tell you to learn skills for artificial intelligence jobs that keep disappearing faster than you can retrain. You can feel it when inflation came down on paper, but your groceries, your insurance, your electricity, and your healthcare quietly ate the difference. And you can feel it when the stock market keeps hitting highs that never reach your street. So today we are going to talk about real-world monopoly, how it works, and why it feels like the rules only apply to you. This video is about the dark playbook behind wealth concentration. You will hear a story inspired by real monopoly behavior around the world, including how control of land, utilities, and data turns a city into a payment system you cannot opt out of. Then we will connect it directly to what is happening right now in the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, and across Europe, where housing, energy, telecom, and insurance are consolidating, and we will connect it to the most modern layer of all, which is control of information, consumer behavior, and automated systems powered by artificial intelligence. By the end, you are going to understand something that sounds harsh, but it is the only thing that explains the pattern. When you cannot compete, you do not just lack talent. You are trapped in someone else's leverage. Now, remember this line. In every economy, there are two kinds of players: the ones who lose play by competing, the ones who win play by removing competition, not by being the best, but by becoming the only game left standing. That is the difference between a market and a cage. And here is where the story gets uglier, because in 2026, cages are getting built faster than ever. Picture Hong Kong as a chessboard. Small space, huge money, international capital, and a constant demand for housing, utilities, and services. Now picture one family-like power structure treating the city like a private network. Not just owning buildings, owning access, owning the utilities that power your daily life, owning the transaction flow around you, and owning the legal armor to make challenges extremely expensive. You already know this concept. We just do not like to say it out loud. When one group can decide the price of essential life inputs, people do not really get to choose. They can complain online, they can vote, they can yell at politicians, they can file complaints, but the practical outcome is still the same. You pay because you need heat in winter, power in summer, water running, an address for deliveries, and internet to work, apply, and survive. That is monopoly as a lifestyle. And now, translate that to 2026. In your world right now, you might not live in a city where one family controls natural gas imports, but you absolutely live in a world where energy pricing is consolidated, where utilities are regional oligopolies, where telecom is owned by a shrinking set of giants, where landlord power is protected by local laws, where insurance markets collapse and then reconcentrate, and where property management funnels residents into one preferred ecosystem. In the background, artificial intelligence is making this easier because automated pricing, automated credit scoring, and automated risk models allow companies to charge more accurately and squeeze faster. The monopoly is not always one name, sometimes it is an ownership web. But the mechanism is the same, and here is the first data punch that should make you sit up. According to Federal Reserve research and the mainstream compilation of household finance data, real median household income in the United States has struggled to keep pace with housing costs for years. And even when inflation prints improve, shelter costs, insurance costs, and interest rate sensitive payments keep dragging. In plain English, inflation is down can still mean your cost of living is up. That is because the system does not return you to 2019. It keeps the higher price regime alive. So when you hear people argue about good inflation or target inflation, you should hear a different sentence underneath it. Someone benefits from keeping you paying. Now let's step into the playbook. The billionaire family-style operator understood something simple. If you want to control a city, you start with land and housing. But not in the way you think. You do not just buy a bunch of apartments and collect rent like a quiet landlord. You buy land in advance in places that will become scarce later. Then you restrict building. You let population growth and demand do the rest. The scarcity becomes a weapon. Prices rise because the supply story stays broken. Here is the trick that feels unfair because it is unfair. The operator does not have to build everything right away. In many markets, building is slow, permitting is political, infrastructure is time-consuming, and neighbors fight development. That means the monopoly player can buy time and buy land. Then they can time releases of supply like a throttle. If you are building under normal conditions, you build because you need rent next year. If you are building under monopoly conditions, you build because you want maximum price next year. Those are not the same motivations. One is economic survival. The other is price control. Now, open a loop in your head. Remember this idea of scarcity as a deliberate strategy. We will come back to how this maps to 2026 housing. But first, let's talk utilities and the hidden layer. When a monopoly player controls housing supply, they also control the attached ecosystem. Building management, water and electricity contracts, gas supply, internet and telecom hookups. Then comes something modern, data. In 2026, data is not just what you like. Data is your credit profile, your payment reliability, your commute pattern, your device behavior, your household consumption, your likelihood to churn, and your responsiveness to offers. Companies use this to personalize prices, personalize penalties, and personalize your options. And what you thought was just a landlord relationship becomes a funnel into a data system that is optimized to extract payments from you. Now take that and look at what is happening across Western cities. In many places, housing is effectively monetized through bundled services, through mandatory property management, through utility partnerships, through insurance contracts tied to specific providers, and through rental platforms that act like private gates. Even if you never sign a contract with one family, you might still be in a system that behaves like one. The result is the same. You are paying a price that is not based on your needs, it is based on the operator's power, and that is why the rent went up story always feels personal. It is not personal, it is mechanical. Now here is where anger usually starts for viewers, and it is justified. You might be thinking, how is this legal? How is this allowed? Because most monopoly behavior does not need to break laws, it needs to exploit the rules. It needs to operate just inside legal limits while it builds legal capacity that dwarfs yours. It needs lawyers, lobbyists, and a deep understanding of how regulation gets written and enforced. One of the core lessons from monopoly operators is this: the average person risks small mistakes and gets punished for them. The monopoly operator runs large strategies and gets protected by expertise. That is not an accident. That is asymmetric defense. In 2026, this becomes even more intense because the legal system is slow and expensive. Monopoly consolidations can take years, and by the time ordinary people react, the structure is already built. Now, pattern interrupt. Let's switch from land and utilities to a modern pressure point: artificial intelligence and employment. You hear it everywhere. Learn to code. Get AI skills. Move to a new role. But the truth in 2026 is that AI is not just replacing tasks, it is reducing the need for middle-class job ladders. It is collapsing roles that used to take years to master. A junior employee that used to do copy edits, basic code, reporting, customer support scripts, and simple analysis can now be replaced by software that is cheaper and faster. So what happens to households when the job ladder collapses? You rent longer. You delay major life decisions. You struggle to save for down payments. And when you cannot buy, monopoly operators still collect. They just collect more from people who have nowhere to go. And this is exactly how monopoly thrives in a modern economy. Not by making you richer, by making alternatives harder. Now, bring the Fed into this, because it is part of the same pressure system. When the Federal Reserve raises interest rates to fight inflation, many people understand it as a way to cool demand. But you and I both know it also cools your ability to borrow. It makes mortgages harder to afford. It increases the cost of credit cards. It increases the cost of business financing. It increases the monthly payment on existing variable rate debt. Meanwhile, the monopoly-like operators can often survive higher rates better because they have assets, financing relationships, and timing advantages. They can refinance. They can wait. They can buy selectively when others are forced to sell. So higher rates do not just fight inflation, they reallocate wealth, and they tend to reallocate it from households toward asset owners. Now here comes a hard question. If rates rise and households struggle, why does the stock market keep climbing in many periods? Why do indices hit highs while real people feel poorer? The honest answer is that asset markets price future returns for capital, households price immediate bills. Those are different clocks. Monopoly operators and large asset holders benefit when their pricing power stays intact and when their asset portfolios recover faster than wages. That disconnect is not accidental, it is structural. And if you want one sentence that explains the feeling of being trapped, it is this: the system can tighten for you while it loosens for the owners. Now let's go deeper into the monopoly strategy itself. The operator did not just control land, it controlled the rhythm of scarcity. Think about a market like housing. If you rush to build, you increase supply, prices may fall, and your power weakens. If you pace development and maintain scarcity, prices rise and your leverage strengthens. So a monopoly operator can buy farmland-like assets when they are cheap, wait, let scarcity build, and then release supply at a profit-maximizing time. You might think that sounds like speculation. It is speculation, but it is more. It is monopoly timing. And it can happen even when officials say they want affordability, because the incentives are misaligned. Politicians want stable social conditions. Households want lower prices. Monopoly operators want higher prices. If monopoly operators can credibly threaten stability by slowing development or by using legal power, politicians end up negotiating with them. The operator plays the role of economic gatekeeper, and because the operator's capital is hard to replace, the city's leadership often treats monopoly power as the price of functioning. In 2026, you can see this logic in the way housing development gets delayed by bureaucracy, by lawsuits, by political fights, and by local NIMBY pressure. It is not always one villain, but the effect is still the same. Supply stays constrained, prices stay elevated. Now recall the open loop. Remember the idea that households are told to buy early, save more, and stop complaining. Remember how the operator benefits from scarcity. Now connect it to your life. If you are a normal worker in 2026, you have less time, you have inflation damage, you have higher insurance premiums, higher energy costs, and higher loan costs. You also have AI disruption that reduces the probability of a sudden salary jump. The window to buy has narrowed. So if prices fall even slightly, you still might not qualify or afford. And monopoly-like operators know this. They do not need everyone to buy. They need enough to keep demand sticky while keeping supply tight. That is why the housing affordability crisis can feel permanent. It is not that the average family is unlucky, it is that the system has an incentive to keep supply constrained and demand elastic. Now here is a pattern interrupt for the financial part you do not like to hear. The people who profit from housing scarcity also tend to benefit from the financial system that prices risk on paper but rewards capital in practice. When your mortgage rate is high, it hurts you. When big players buy distressed assets, it can enrich them. When the market runs, they sell into the run or borrow against appreciated assets. They do not need salary growth to maintain wealth. They have collateral, and in 2026, collateral is everything. Which brings us to the next layer, selling essential services and extracting value beyond the obvious. In the old story, the operator controlled supermarkets, retail supply, and everyday items inside neighborhoods. If you lived there, you were effectively dependent on their vendors. If you wanted specific goods, you went to their stores. Now you might wonder, why does that matter? Because once you control daily consumption, you control margins you never see. A monopoly can take tiny margins across millions of transactions and still build enormous profit. And it can do this while using pricing power to reduce your bargaining position. In the modern West, the same effect shows up in concentrated landlord and property management ecosystems, in insurance procurement, in utility billing, and in telecom packages. Also in the creator economy, where you see people selling the dream of passive income. Let's talk about that dream for a moment, because it is one of the biggest modern illusions. You can become a content creator. You can make videos about investing. You can build an audience. But in 2026, most people make almost nothing from content. The platforms monetize attention, and the distribution is controlled. The algorithm decides who gets paid. You might call it freedom, but it is mostly a rental agreement with a gatekeeper. So when you see social media influencers tell you that you can be financially independent if you just scale content, remember this. Financial independence is not about posting, it is about ownership of cash flow. Most creators do not own the platform. They do not own the infrastructure. They do not own the customer relationship. They are paid crumbs from a system where the real owners take most of the upside. That is creator economy, but the monopoly mechanism is the same. Now, bring it back to artificial intelligence. AI can automate content production, customer service, and ad targeting. That might sound like more opportunity, but it also means the barrier to entry drops for low-skilled work while the rewards concentrate for those who own the distribution channels. And distribution channels are controlled by a small number of companies, so AI does not free you from the gatekeepers. It makes their leverage more efficient. Now here is where the story becomes morally darker, and it is not just about money. Monopoly behavior is also about respect. The operator understands that resentment is dangerous. The operator does not just control transactions, it controls social friction. In the story, the operator behaves politely toward low-level workers, not because he is kind in a sentimental way, but because he understands consequence. Disrespect can backfire. A low-level person might not have legal power, but they may have access, they may have influence, they may have the ability to delay shipments, misroute information, make mistakes, or create chaos. In a well-managed monopoly ecosystem, the operator reduces that risk by maintaining dignity. Now you might ask, why are we talking about respect in a money video? Because it is the same system thinking. When you treat everyone as irrelevant, you create vulnerabilities, and when the power is concentrated, those vulnerabilities are expensive. In 2026, those vulnerabilities look like this. One software glitch can lock out customers, one data error can deny claims, one insurance underwriting update can raise premiums overnight, one HR misclassification can trigger layoffs, one platform moderation policy can erase a business. Monopoly ecosystems run on systems, and systems fail in human ways. So yes, respect matters, not because it makes you a better person, but because it makes you harder to sabotage. Now here comes another cliffhanger into the darkest part. You have been focused on land, utilities, and everyday transactions. But the real monopoly power is not just price. It is ability to play timing games across crises. Because when the world panics, prices move. Markets drop, sellers are forced, liquidity dries up. That is when capital can buy assets cheaply. That is when the operator converts chaos into profit. This is the part nobody wants to admit. During financial crises, the average household sees danger. The average wealthy investor sees bargains. And monopoly-like operators see control opportunities. In 1997, for example, major financial stress periods created price gaps and forced some companies into fire sales. A capital-rich operator could acquire assets during turmoil while competitors scrambled for funding. Then, after the recovery, the operator would list shares, attract institutional capital, and widen the moat again. You can map that to 2008. You can map it to 2020. You can map it to the recurring regional banking stress in the 2020s. The pattern holds. Crises are not uniformly bad. They are good for whoever has the cash. And now, in 2026, you have more crises layered on top of each other. You have rate volatility. You have climate-driven insurance shocks. You have energy price uncertainty. You have migration costs. You have global debt levels that keep climbing, surpassing $300 trillion in total global government and corporate debt when you combine all major categories. When debt is that high, the margin for error is low. Any shock can trigger a cascade. But the operators with monopoly power are often the ones who can reposition faster. They can negotiate. They can wait. They can buy. Now let's do a micro story, because abstractions feel less real than rent. Picture a 35-year-old nurse named David. He works night shifts because that is what his hospital schedule allows. He thought he would buy a small place in 5 years. Then inflation hit, and groceries became a bigger line item than his planned savings. Then his insurance went up because his state area got labeled high risk. Then interest rates rose, and the monthly payment on any mortgage option became a fantasy number. He is not lazy. He is not stupid. He is just trapped in timing. Now imagine the hospital where he works is part of a regional consolidated system. Imagine his rent is owned through layers of property management entities. Imagine his utilities are provided by regional oligopolies. Imagine his telecom package is locked into a contract structure. Imagine his credit profile is evaluated through automated models. David can work hard, but he cannot outwork a structure that controls essential costs. And the stress does not just hurt him emotionally, it changes his decisions, it delays his ability to build assets. Now remember the operator playbook. The operator does not need David to get rich. David just needs to